the short run and this is the long run. It's actually telling you something about where interest rates are going to be in the long run. So, compared to the short run, what does it tell you about the long run rate of interest? It's going to be higher. So, what information does that have about the future? Is the future going to look good? Is the future going to look bad? So, one thing it tells you is that future rates are likely to be higher. So, typically, what kind of conditions, recessionary conditions or with strong economic growth do you see? So,
This indicates more uncertainty. More uncertainty percentage.
well, actually, recessions typically go together with lower interest rates. Okay, for multiple reasons. On the demand side, you can think of why recession would be associated with lower interest rates. That's Lisa.
Yeah.
Can you switch it off? I'm sure you can do it, right? So, typically recessions, low interest rates go together, whereas when you think demand is going to be buoyant, alright, high interest rates are more likely. So this basically means outlook for the future is positive. Okay? Whereas downward sloping, not just that, downward sloping yield curves give a negative signal about the future. Alright? So these curves actually are pretty interesting by themselves and contain a lot of information on which way an economy is headed towards. The reason I'm looking at you typically see yield curves, I'm sure in some of course on bond pricing, etc., in some kind of macro course. The reason I'm bringing it up here is to tell you why looking at interest rates is something that will be pretty interesting. Alright? And what I've plotted here is a yield curve simply representing the spread between bonds of short and long-term maturity. Okay? To fix your idea a little bit more, let me tell you where these yields are coming from. Let's say I have a bond, a zero coupon bond with a face value of 100. And let's say it's just a one-period bond. Alright. Then the yield on that bond would be defined as follows. It's like the P would be the price of the bond. So it's like I'm buying the bond with PE today, hoping to earn on it a return of Y1 held till maturity. Maturity in this case being a single period. If I'm talking about an N-period bond, it simply means the yield on that N-period bond is like putting in PD amount today, holding it for foreign periods to get 100. Standard definition of yield. Okay. Now, of course, the rate of return on the bond need not remain same over N periods. If you're actually holding it for N periods, it might vary because the rate of return on the bond varies with its price. And you must have done these things in any standard finance course. So then, I could write this as the equivalent to a situation where I hold a bond for N periods. In the first period, I know the return for certainty. This is what would be the short rate of interest. You could call it the interest rate, the short rate, whatever. This is what you observe. And thereafter, you write contracts, right? Wherein F2 is simply a contract written today, a forward contract that promises you a rate of return in the second period. This is the forward contract you're writing 3 periods ahead. Alright? This is just one other way of looking at why you decide to buy a bond today bond for how many periods, right? And typically, what happens is you have at your disposal a couple of strategies. You could actually hold a bond for a single period, go on to the next period, look at the interest rate, and go to the okay. So you could, in other words, exercise the rollover strategy, or you could actually buy a bond and hold it for a period or go long. Alright. Look at, undertake a long bond strategy. And what does the efficient market do? It actually drives the spot rate. So think of I as the spot rate today. I2 is the spot rate next period, I3 is the spot rate 3 periods ahead. Okay. So what the market does is it actually drives your I2s, F2s, I3s, F3s, INs, Fns together. Okay. So we will actually adopt long bond strategy. Okay. That's one hypothesis. On what is it that determines the price of the bond. Okay. So basically, and the whole point of talking about all this is to tell you that I can have a variety of futures. I could actually have certain forward rates as well. Alright. And depending on whether the forward rate curve lies above or below the yield curve, okay, I figure out on whether I actually need to, on whether interest rates are likely to fall ahead or to increase ahead. Okay. So yield curve therefore can have actually quite a lot of useful information. Okay. So good reason to care about interest rates. And just an aside, you could also look at these terms involving jump spread. Any idea what the interest curve based on jump spread is all about? Jump bond spread. So basically a jump bond is one which is of lower quality, lower investment quality. Okay, so you have credit rating agencies which rate bonds, and typically AAA would be, AAA would be higher than AA, okay, or single A. So at any point in time, the spread between bonds of different qualities, lower and higher quality, is also something that contains useful information. You have yet another yield curve. And if you Google a bit, you will see, for instance, B and B curve, which simply tell you the difference in yield between bond rated EBD versus B. Again, why do we care about those? The way they move again indicates whether the bond is going to be recession or out of it. Okay? A widening spread would mean risky bonds are becoming riskier. Default is more likely, a recession is probably on the corner. Okay? So that, I mean, those are actually some of the reasons why you care a lot about which way interest rates are moving, what's happening to the rates across term structures, across bond quality, actually contains a lot of useful information that could be useful to firms, particularly for forecasting for the future. Okay? Alright. Now, having sort of talked about this, let's see where real interest rate comes to the picture. Yeah.
We expect the fact that when we say that bonds are yields are supposed to be upward sloping because they're given up liquidity for a longer period of time. That's the layman's excuse for having a upward sloping yield curve. So now that will be true at all points of time.
No, you can have all kinds of yield curves.
No, but when I say that I would, in order to give up liquidity for a longer period of time, I would always have to be given more incentive. So that will be true at all points. So that's a true. So what I was saying was, what are the other factors which would cause this upward sloping yield curve to be substituted? So
Precisely, about is to look at something that's lies at its base. Alright? This is actually telling me this is a 3-year bond actually gives you lower return than something that's for a much shorter period, which lies in the face of this particular number. Right? So basically, the way to read the information presented in the yield curve is what is the market's expectation about borrowing rates or interest rates in the future. Okay? So that's exactly what the shape is telling you. Okay? Same thing, that's a forward rate. So just like I can have, now yield curve is referring to something like this. Alright? Now, if I were to plot these things, I actually have a forward rate curve. Okay, this is telling me today's expectation of which rate future interest rates are likely to get. They could actually be lower than or higher than today. Okay, so basically the information embedded in this curve is a summary statistic, if you like, capturing what is the market, the bond market expectation about the future. That's really the foundation. Okay. So I mean, they can actually be very, very useful for policy, and not just these kinds of yield curves which are giving you yields across maturity, giving you the difference between bond returns and bonds of different maturity, but also jump spreads. Okay. So difference in yields across different classes of investments.
Can it be just a simple horizontal line?
It could be.
Like Japan, for instance.
So, by the way, you actually see yield curves like this, which is the transition sort of yield curve. Okay? So, you could think of it as moving from either from here to here or from here to there. Alright? And it is in transition. So, basically, some sort of market uncertainty about which way the future goes. Alright? So that it actually, we can actually have a broad by itself on bond pricing, on debt markets, and yield curves. Because of course there the entire focus will be on bond pricing. Because I hope you see what yield curves tell you about interest rates has opposite implications for bond pricing. If interest rates are likely to rise, obviously bond prices are likely to fall, and for bondholders, they have to decide whether to buy or sell, depending on whether they want to profit or avoid a loss. Anyhow, for my purpose, I just wanted you to realize that even from a macroeconomic point of view, from a policy point of view, yield curves can actually be quite cheap. Alright, now if you look at this particular statement that we have about bond yields, it's actually written out in nominal terms, right? CD is the amount of money with which you're buying the bond, alright? 100 is the face value that you get at maturity, alright? Nothing but prices in here. But if I care about not simply about the nominal amount of money, but what it will buy, alright, then actually what I should be looking at is not simply nominal bond prices or nominal values, but the real rate. In other words, let's say this is some price index. Okay, so if I deflate my return by price index, okay, so this is the value of price index today. This is the real worth, if you like, of the amount I'm putting in to buy a bond of say 500, and at maturity, okay, the real value, whatever I'm going to get, is determined by the value of the price index at that time, which is 5%. Alright? In that case, what I'm actually looking at is the real rate of interest or the real return that I expect to earn on a bond. So actually, you could put a so this again equal to this one table bond. So, I should just put these together. So from here I have 100 is equal to so we're just looking at the one period 0 to 1, 0 to 1, and I is the nominal rate of interest on the bond, whereas by definition R is the real rate of interest. Okay. So what this gives you is equal to, now I could just write that as 1 plus add a plus minus 1. Okay. So what I'm going to have here first is 1 plus I plus, now what is this? So pi t was my price index. So what is this? Yes. So it's actually now obviously there will be this cross product term, which would be very, very small. So this is a standard trick that I use all the time, so that what you could write is now that if you write is the first one-class relation. What does this tell you is, since it tells you something that you know very well, that what is the real interest rate? The nominal rate minus expected inflation. Okay. It also tells you that movement in your nominal interest rate could actually lead you to two reasons. The interest rate could be high in the future as per your answer, either because real returns are expected to rise, or that they could be high because inflation is expected to be high. Okay? So again, another way of looking at the information embedded in your system and why they could actually be pretty useful. And what we've actually achieved is the first of our steps, as I said. So you need to set this aside somewhere. We've seen how interest rates and inflation release. Who knows real rate of interest? With its implication for the normal rate of interest. Now we're talking about open economies.